Sankara, 33. Claudette Colvin, 15. Nelson Mandela, 26. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo, 38. Kwame Nkrumah, 21. These are the names of some of my personal heroes of African descent. Heroes who at these very young ages embarked on their incredible journeys of change-making. Despite the assurance of risk to life, to security, to comfort, these young men and women harnessed their fears and stepped into the gap to create the future that they preferred. We know from their stories that they could have run away in search of easier realities somewhere else. But instead, these heroes searched for something else. They searched for courage. Today, I am here to make the case that Africa does not, in fact, have a leadership crisis. To say so would be to assert, against historical evidence, that it is ever the older leader who is the protagonist of change. He or she seldom is. Accumulated self-interest, ties to promises long made, a lack of energy, make it very difficult for the older leader to be the change maker. No, our issue is not a crisis of leadership. What Africa is actually suffering from is a lack of a critical mass of courageous youth. My work as a leadership practitioner sees me engaging with the personal stories of our emerging leaders, their desires, their hopes, their frustrations. And while I encounter some incredible leaders with drive and energy, what intrigues me the most about the majority of us is our curious entanglement with comfort. Our insistence that I could do a little bit more, but it is inconvenient to my current state of affairs, you see. My young family, my career, my income, my security. Essentially, my comfort. 2 years ago, I decided to resign from a lucrative role at an American Ivy League and return to my ailing country of Zimbabwe. Everyone I know said I was barking mad to even consider such a thing. They told me I was going to waste my youth. A close friend of mine advised me, stay in America for a few more years until you at least get a green card. His words, you will need it for a rainy day. Africa always has a rainy day. I rejected that option, and everyone agreed that I had courage. Courage, that ability to take tough decisions and take tough actions precisely when it is most difficult to do so. You see, my country at the time, and still is, plagued with political instability and economic decline. Power shortages, water rationing, limited career opportunities, a declining health system, even monopoly money. These are the issues of the day. The 15 years that I had enjoyed, enjoying the comfort, of the different countries that I'd lived in, the UK, the US, and South Africa, were really 15 years where I was avoiding the big elephant in the room. Like many of my peers, I wanted to go back home one day, but only when things got better. Then slowly but surely, that question that I'm sure plagues you once in a while became louder and unbearable in my head. Whose responsibility was it to make it better? And I started to feel guilty. So here I finally was, home, eager to make a difference, but not naive to the issues I was likely to face. When I landed in our small airport and made my way into my brother-in-law's car, my nephew, who was 16 at the time, said something that rattled me. He said, "Welcome to the land where nothing works, Auntie. You're crazy for coming back." My heart made its way to my throat, and I started to wonder if I had indeed made a mistake. Once the smooth stretch of Airport Road was finished, and we started to hit pothole after pothole, and I took in the declining state of the infrastructure in my country, the torn flags barely hanging from bendy poles, and the old paint that was on its last legs, I had to admit that in that moment, more than courage, I felt anxious, I felt alone, and I felt helpless. What did I really think I was going to do to make a difference? Who did I think I was? What delusions of grandeur was I harboring? And to be honest, in that moment, I did think, what was I thinking leaving the US without that damn green card? The anxiety was quickly followed by anger and blame. What had they done to the country? When would they wake up to this state of decline? And would they actually give youth like myself a chance to self-actualize? The words my nephew spoke and the emotions I felt afterwards characterize for me what I think is wrong with the spirit of youth in the 21st century. The sense of resignation and fatalism when it comes to strategically addressing the issues on the continent. There's always their fault. They, the politicians, they, the colonialists, they, the multilaterals, they, the institutions, but never us. Never our lack of real engagement. Never our half measures. Never our tendency to run away and blame. Never our lack of courage to do the thing we know we should be doing, building towards what is rightfully ours. Nkosana Moyo, arguably Africa's foremost thought leader, makes the point that invention, imagination, and innovation belong to the young. And yet even the youngest amongst us, like my nephew, is paralyzed by a sense of powerlessness in the face of old power and old systems. We lack courage. We run away, we complain, we intellectualize, we even toy. Our anger makes us reactionary. We seldom actually make the decision to strategically build towards what we believe we deserve. Different to these heroes who understood that youth was perhaps their greatest asset, we guard our youth selfishly so as not to experience any inconvenience or danger. Steve Bantu Biko, at only 26, started the Black People's Convention to promote the ideas of Black consciousness, which remain central to Black identity to this day, putting his life on the line. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, at only 34, gave the speech that called out Liberia's corporations and their non-patriotic approach to business and development, putting her career on the line. Martin Luther King, at only 26, became president of the Montgomery Improvement Association and organized a 13-month bus boycott, not just a toy, that would see to the end of segregation on buses in Montgomery, later losing his life for his convictions. Aliko Dangote, at only 20 years old, started the entrepreneurial journey that would make him Africa's richest man, but also the 67th richest person in the world. When I met him in 2013, he told me he hadn't taken a vacation for 12 years. These men and women displayed courage in daring to not only imagine, but to act on their convictions of what was right for the time in which they lived. They and others like them did not worry that by taking the difficult path, they would not be able to live a luxurious lifestyle. It seems to many of us that the African dream is to have the right address, the right car, the right clothes, and holidays, and to broadcast them on social media with just the right selfie or video. Our predecessors actually faced real uncertainty. They faced arrest. They even faced death. My work as an ontological coach has taught me 3 critical insights for cultivating courage. So I would want to offer these insights to you as an invitation to live your life courageously in this particular historical moment where Africa needs us the most. First, we have to cultivate different thought and emotional patterns. We don't teach emotions in schools and seldom in our MBAs, and yet emotions are the final drivers towards actions. Our actions are determined by how we feel, and how we feel is determined by what we think on a day-to-day basis. The challenge I encounter with the young leaders I work with is that they're stuck in two equally arresting thought patterns. One says that history and the world have done us wrong, and that we remain victims of a colonial past, and more recently, victims of current leadership. In other words, we are owed something by these people who have done us wrong. The other is of an inflated idea of an Africa rising that is informed more by GDP figures and less by the lived experience of the average African. Both are problematic. The first thought pattern cultivates emotions of anger, resentment, and entitlement. Dangerous, because we know that while these emotions feel powerful at a vibrational level, they're actually paralyzing and limiting. The second thought pattern tends to create emotions of euphoria, equally dangerous, because they're not grounded in present reality. The intermediary emotion between these two extremes, courage, is the grounding emotion that launches the higher ranking emotions of reason, resilience, and then enlightenment. With courage, we can begin to look head on at the fact that our growth remains non-inclusive and that the Africa Rising story is the story of an elite few and not of the deprived many. We can take a look at the fact that we keep voting septuagenarians into power despite being the youngest population in the world. We can look at the fact that we continue to preserve the sovereignty of small, unsustainable nations instead of harnessing the power of our pan-African ideal. And the fact that just as we missed the Industrial Revolution, it actually looks like we may miss the technological one too. As long as we refuse to confront the issues as they are with courage, we will continue to cultivate the wrong emotions and therefore create second-best solutions to our challenges. Despite the injustices of the past, no one owes us anything. And despite the future of the promise, we are not of the promise of the future, we are not yet there. Courage as an emotion will allow us to look at these things head on. Secondly, we need to clearly articulate what we are willing to risk. A defining element of courage is that despite the fear you feel, you choose to put something at risk in order to have an impact. Often we want to talk about what we stand to gain when change happens, but seldom what we stand to lose. The reality check of what I could lose is precisely what makes courage so difficult. The question we need to start asking ourselves as young people is, what do I choose right now to forego so that I can experience in the future what I deserve, what the people of my continent deserve? This is what our liberation leaders have over us and keep holding over our heads. They were willing to lose something, and often we are not. It was J.F. Kennedy who said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." When was the last time you risked something with the conscious mindset that you were doing it for your country? Think about it. When was the last time you risked something with the conscious mindset that you were doing it for your continent? It's a step that we cannot miss if we are to create change. And finally, step 3. We need to go beyond protest and toy-toying and harness the power of technology, information, and networks to build the institutions and infrastructure that speak to our ideals. Protest is a useful tool, yes, but it is not the most powerful. Organization is more powerful. Collaboration across borders is much more sustainable. Building excellent systems that dislodge old, irrelevant ones is true revolution. The story of William Kamkwamba opened up a realm of possibilities for us as young people. If a boy in a poor village in Malawi at only age 14 could change the destiny of his village using only 2 books and scrap material from a rubbish dump to build power generating and water generating windmills, then what excuse do we have? Emotional expert Richard Asarian illustrates that the outcome of acting courageously is that often something new is created. This is a critical pointer for us as African youth. If the energy we are exerting is not creating something new, but is used largely to complain and protest against old institutions, then we are in fact not being courageous. We are being passive-aggressive. When you exist in an emotional energy of anger and protest all the time, you're likely on what ontologists call a downward spiral, and very far from creativity, passion, or innovation. So don't be seduced. Protesting and toy-toying alone are not good indicators for a society's ability to move upwards. What you fight only strengthens. What you resist persists. But when you build, when you create, when you birth a new reality into humanity's consciousness, now that is powerful. Grasa Machel, 28. Ruth First, 21. Dennis Goldberg, 28. Patrice Lumumba, 33. Fred Swanika, 18. Ahmed Kathrada, 12. C.S. Lewis stated that courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point. The 21st century will be Africa's greatest test. What we become will be dependent on whether we, as African youth, start to understand that the burden is upon us to live our lives with courage, and perhaps to even lose them with courage. The next time you find yourself complaining about the state of our continent, the next time you find yourself resigning to the status quo, the next time you start looking for a way out or for an easy avenue, remember this: life shrinks and expands in proportion to the courage that you are willing to cultivate. Our crisis is not a crisis of leadership. Our crisis is a crisis of youth in danger of never knowing the power of their courage. I thank you.